All was calm and all was bright when we arrived at the farm. There were a few other people there, like my husband and I, who came to see the Christmas light display. No, I was 11 days shy of my due date, and frankly, I just needed something to get me out of the house and keep my mind off of all the waiting and the wondering. A few kids ran eagerly over to the building where they could meet Santa, excited to get a chance to tell him what they wanted. And as we wandered around, we came upon an area where you could see farm animals. Now, they did up the yard where the animals were grazing. A giant nativity display was set up, so you had all of these sheep and a donkey milling about, the Holy Family, gazing with love upon the baby Jesus. My husband and I paused to look at the scene, mostly for me to catch my breath, and I found myself looking at Mary. I felt a kinship to her that year, to say the least, although I was hoping I didn't go into labor while on the farm. Anyway, as I'm looking at Mary, wondering what she must have felt and thought and pondered that first Christmas, I realized something was off. I nudged my husband and said, "Do you see it?" We both looked more closely, and it wasn't a trick of the light. Mary had a full beard, a thick, luscious beard that would be the envy of many today. Now that's a detail I've never encountered in the Gospels, let alone any artwork depicting the nativity story, although I suppose anything is possible. But there was Mary, looking at her child with a nicer looking beard than Joseph had. So we stood there, reconciling the familiar story with a scene in front of us that looked similar, but suddenly felt very strange. And it was a good minute of silence before my husband finally said, "This is different." And we broke into laughter. Friends, this Christmas is different. It looks like Christmas. The calendar tells us it's Christmas Eve. We're worshiping, singing our favorite carols, hearing the angels' words once more, but it's different. Something feels off. Without the fullness of our traditions and gatherings, without gathering in a candlelit sanctuary, it feels different. We've had to make changes to our Christmas gatherings and celebrations, and it certainly isn't the way we expected or hoped that we would be celebrating Christmas this year. It's Christmas, but this is different. So maybe you too might feel some kinship to Mary this Christmas. I imagine she had very similar feelings when it came time for her to give birth. Whatever she and Joseph had been planning were completely upended when the census was called in the latter months of her pregnancy. They instead packed up and went the long journey to Bethlehem, and it was different. When they got there, there was no space in any of the inns for them to stay, no family who could take them in. And when the only space they could find was in a stable full of animals, it was different. And then Mary goes into labor surrounded by animals. She isn't close to her family. She doesn't have a midwife there to support her. And her birth plan is completely out the stable door. And then when she places her son into a manger, a place where animals would eat, it was different. Now, I wonder if during all of this, Mary was upset, frustrated, anxious, and disappointed. The pregnancy and the angel's news to her was a significant change for her in her life, and then to be without her familiar comforts and spaces in this time, certainly she was exhausted and worn out by everything that kept changing. But then shepherds come in from the fields, and they're breathless, full of wonder and songs, tripping over themselves to share what the angels said, that this child of hers is the Messiah. And there he is in the manger, just like the angels said. I imagine as they look at the baby, like all people, the shepherds probably shared their own dreams and ideas of what he would be like. a strong grip like that, Jesus, he's going to be a good warrior to help liberate his people. You see how he's looking at everything? That kid doesn't miss a beat. That's the sign of a great future leader right there. And in the midst of all this dreaming and conversation, I imagine there's a moment where Jesus cries and reaches and turns towards Mary, and all of a sudden this smelly stable is full of hope, joy, love, and life. They can feel the wonder of the moment. No matter how different it was from what they thought or expected, God was here, just as God promised. Now Luke says that Mary ponders all of this in her heart. Maybe like every parent, she's wondering and dreaming of what her child's future will be like. Maybe she's pondering what to make of all the strange and unexpected things that have happened in the past 9 months and how it still couldn't take away this joy and wonder. So much for her is different. And yet we don't have to hear her internal thoughts to understand this. I mean, this year has been different with so many unexpected things and change plans. I mean, 9-10 months ago, we could hardly imagine a Christmas Eve quite like tonight. And yet the miracle of Christmas still comes, as it always does. It's different. And yet we can ponder with Mary, this is still good. And just maybe, God's got this. You see, the Christmas story at its heart is a birth story. During Advent, we journey with the prophets who dreamed of how God would bring life and healing to the world. We journey with Mary, who received a vision of what God would do through her. And we journey with her and Joseph until Jesus is born into the world. And suddenly the hopes and things the prophets have dreamed of is seen in this child. The very presence and love of God is all of a sudden real and tangible in this vulnerable little child. It's so very different from what they all imagined a Messiah would look like or what God would do. I mean, can you imagine God in a child? And yet somehow it was good. And just maybe, God's got this. This isn't just Mary's birth story, though. This is our story as well, because we participate in birthing anytime we have an idea, a feeling, a dream we can barely put into words. And then we wait and tend to it and work faithfully to bring that into being. It may be the idea of justice, the words of a song, a dream of peace, an idea that we should reach out to someone. And then we tend to it until it is something that we no longer dream, but see and hold and experience in the flesh. All good ideas, all movements of change and justice, all new life begin with dreams and ideas that something can be different, that things can be a little better than what we see right now. And like a parent, we tend to these dreams as God works through them to bring about goodness and wholeness for all the world. We have gone through a lot of change this year, and we've also let go of a lot of things. We have seen stuff that has challenged us, grieved us, and opened our eyes to the pain and the hurt in the human and the natural world. And I can't help but wonder what is beginning in the midst of all of this. What new dreams has God stirred up in your soul this year? As we listen to the birth story, not just of a child, but of the beginning of God's promises of wholeness and reconciliation made real, what is the dream that God is giving you, that God is bringing into being through all of us? Perhaps these ideas and dreams will be a blueprint for a future different from the reality that we have known in 2020. A blueprint for a world marked by more peace and justice, a world where there is no more suffering. I really believe that hearing this sacred story and singing these songs stirs something in our souls. It's meaningful that God came as a baby. Our human instinct around babies is to dream about their future and tend to them. On the one hand, we try and imagine and figure out who this child will be. Oh, he looks just like his dad. Look at her kicking. She's going to be a soccer player for sure. When my daughter was born, we looked at her and it was like the possibilities were limitless. We dreamed with abandon, every movement and gurgle an opportunity to imagine what a future with her might look like. But the thing is, she's her own person. And part of the joy of this continuing journey is seeing, glimpse by glimpse, who she is. 2 years later, there are some things that are how we hoped they would be, better than we imagined. And there are things that are different, and yet no less good. In her birth, she gave us dreams and hopes and filled us with life. And she continues to call to us to tend to this life and gift with our very selves, to be present to her, to respond with love and care as she navigates the world and reveals who she is to us. To try and leave this world a little better than we found it so she and all children can thrive. You see, all children remind us that when there is great need, our instinct is to respond with love and care. Friends, the child we celebrate on Christmas is no less than God with us. This child is love with us, grace with us, forgiveness with us, and that stirs within us dreams and longings and possibilities. The idea that we can leave the world a little bit better than we found it, that it might look more and more like the promise and peace spoken of by the angels over Bethlehem. What dreams are stirring in you? What does a future look like where love and forgiveness are the way we live, parent, and work and interact with others? What is the vision that you have of a more peaceful and just and humane world? Friends, the Christmas story reminds us that we are all dreamers. Like those who gathered around the manger so long ago, we come to this night with curiosity, wonder, and it awakens within us a holy imagination for what is possible. We may not know what the future holds, and it will probably be different than we expect. But we can live as those who dream, trusting that the God who stirs up these dreams is with us, is good, and that the justice and love and joy that we dream of, we trust that we can live as if they are real now. The Christmas story is just the beginning that continues year after year, waiting to be born in you and me and in all people. God's love continues to reveal itself to us over time, changing us and surprising us and calling forth the best in us. And we will nurture this hope, this idea with all of the joy and challenge it will bring. Because this is the way of God, to be born again and again, to reveal love in us and others, to bring out the best in us, and to change us and to change the world into places marked more and more by the light of hope, peace, joy, and love. This is different, and yet this is holy, and just maybe God's got this. May we be those who dream. Amen. Amen.